Hey there guys, so it's my third time of recording this now. This is going to be a slightly different show. For the show that I recorded before that I didn't upload yesterday, because I wanted to give a day to dedicate to Charlie. At least anybody that looks on this channel can look back to this day and see that there was not an upload to mark that occasion. Yeah, there's going to be no sarcasm, there's going to be no jokes or anything like that to really accompany this, because this is truly awful. So she would have heard the news that on Wednesday, the 10th of September 2025, an assassination took place at a university campus in Utah. Prominent speaker, conservative Christian, evangelical, founder of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, was struck in the neck by an assassin's bullet not too long later, after conflicting reports of saying that he was stable or that he was in critical condition, but he was stable and he wasn't. He's now dead. He was pronounced dead. It marked a really big, not to put a, no pun intended, turning point, ladies and gentlemen, because it showed that now ideological opponents, if you're a fan of this show, if you like what we do, if you like a lot of my takes, etc., shows that the people on the other end of the aisle have long been past any kind of dialogue. Because this is how they were willing to treat the moderate political candidate, the moderate Christian conservative, the moderate Republican, who you could dialogue with, who actually wanted to dialogue, people who wanted to save his country, save all of our countries with his example. He's truly a shining beacon of light in a dark, dark world, and that's why people hated him so much on this side, because they didn't want their evils. They didn't want their shortcomings and their lack of virtue and their falling to their vices exposed by this example of virtue and true masculinity, and a tremendous example for young men. Because they couldn't contend with his ideas, because they had no response to his arguments a lot of the time. Very few people would get the better of him in these rhetorical exchanges, despite the fact that he was very respectful for the most part in the way that he did it. He would tell people truths and he wouldn't beat around the bush with them, but he did not do it out of hatred for them. In many ways, he did it out of love for them. So people have forgotten this. People have forgotten that in order to truly love someone, you often have to do things that upset them, say things that they don't like. So what you want about Charlie, with all the labels that the mainstream media put on him as white nationalist, white supremacist, racist, xenophobic, all of these things. All Charlie wanted at his core, all Charlie wanted at his heart, was for people to go to heaven, was for all people to go to heaven. That's what he wanted. That's why his example was so irreplaceable. That's why his example was so good. Even if you disagreed with some of his political takes, just many people on the right, for example, would say that Charlie wasn't as far as he should have been in certain instances. Andrew Wilson, for example, has said that him and Charlie's views slightly differ, because Andrew was a lot more against more aspects of feminism than Charlie was, for example. But the other side, on the other hand, have shown that no matter who you are, if you don't have the exact same opinions that they do, if you're not as strict adherents to party orthodoxy as they are, if you're not part of this woke leftist communist cult that's intent on destroying all of us and destroying our nations, then you are as good as dead. You are as good as dead to them. They don't care about the fact that you want to extend them a microphone to put their ideas forward. Let these ideas clash and may the best ideas win. Because they know their ideas don't stand on their own merits, because they know they're not good ideas, because they know that they're inherently coming from a place of evil. They just don't want to accept it. They'd rather drag everybody down, kicking and screaming with them, than change themselves and have them lift themselves up towards a higher good. The person offering a microphone, rather than speaking into it, they would answer with bullets. These people often don't go down very well in history, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just say that. That incident where people of peace met with bullets for so much as wanting to bridge the gaps in some instances was in Russia not too long before the communist takeover of the country. It was called Bloody Sunday. And Tsar Nicholas wasn't at the Winter Palace at the time this happened, but a lot of Christians and just a lot of regular civilians, even I believe a few priests were there, trying to just make some campaign, really. Not even campaign, but just request from their dear leader some minor reforms. They had pictures of Tsar Nicholas. They adored him. They adored him, right? And for that, by the men that were guarding the Winter Palace, they were met with bullets. And that then sent Russia at that time into more unrest and was one of the pivotal elements of then Tsar Nicholas being overthrown and the communists taken over. In a recent other project I've been working on, ladies and gentlemen, I talked about was understanding your enemy. Understanding your enemy and understanding where they're coming from. So we've seen a massive turning point. And I apologize if these thoughts are a little bit all over the place. I'm still trying to come to terms with all of these things myself, because Charlie was a massive influence personally on me. Truly, truly one in a generational talent. And that's why they had to get rid of him. Because he was making some very big inroads into the number one asset that is important for these people, our enemies. So get onto it in a moment. Understanding your enemy, ladies and gentlemen. So in order for us to win this conflict, we need to understand how the enemy thinks. Not just the enemies that we have on this earth, but the enemies that we have in the spiritual world as well. Because this is symptomatic of a much different conflict. This is a spiritual conflict at its core. This is good versus evil. It's as simple as that. And two things are not the same, not equivalent in any way. This is good versus evil. And Charlie was one of those people that for the forces of good would go to the places where it would really hurt the forces of evil if he was allowed to attain any more success. Turning Point USA, in particular, you have a lot of conservative commentators, Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, who've done various things on university campuses with the young people of the next generation. No organization, however, had the impact that Turning Point did. It spawned a UK branch, for example. It spawned an entire branch that does the similar work within the UK. The inroads that TPUSA and Charlie Kirk in particular, they're starting Turning Point out of his parents' garage when he was 18 years old, made inroads like no other into possibly the most important area that the communists need to maintain a hold of, and they've kept a hold of for a long time. And that's academia, or education. The youth is their most important asset. It's the youth that will carry the revolution forward. Charlie, obviously knowing this and understanding this, he knew that that was where that he had to go. It was one of the primary battlegrounds where not only the right was not having much success, but in order to really turn the tide. It's why a system like Communist China, when it was Mao's Cultural Revolution, was so important. Mao knew the importance of children and of the youth. So they would be the most ardent, being ruled by emotion, not having the logical faculties that they would get until they were an adult. By that point, it would be too late. They would be ruled by emotion, and they would commit some of the gruesomest atrocities of that time. And they would be the most ardent adherents of party orthodoxy. That's why the leftists, communists, have tried to keep such a grip on education through the public education system. Make no mistake, that's not unique to America. That's here as well. We have a very red-washed, rather you could say rainbow-washed, education. Take it from a guy that's seen it from the inside. Ladies and gentlemen, it is full, these leftist themes, anti-racism, diversity, equity and inclusion, anti-colonial theory, which is obviously just a pretext for reverse colonization, and genocide by replacement. The reason Charlie Kirk was feared so much by these people and by these shadowy influences behind the scenes is because they knew this was the one area that if Kirk was allowed to succeed, and his message was resonating with, in particular, a lot of young men who would be the strong men needed to overthrow these institutions in the future. Or at least take them back. Maybe not overthrow them, but take them back from the communist usurpers that have taken residence within them. That they would lose everything. Because the youth is by far the most important to maintaining their revolution. To maintaining their ongoing revolution. It must always be ingrained into them from a young age and all the way through their formative years that they have to fight the patriarchy, fight the system, even though they're acting without knowing it as cogs for said system. The minute they prove to be second even, they prove to be unusable, then they will be thrown away and discarded with the rest. But by then, the next generation will be readily coming through, and the cycle will repeat. In fact, the cycle will repeat year on year with every new batch of students that come into the world. The cycle will repeat year on year. They know this. Charlie knew this, which is why it is tremendously courageous, knowing the risks of this, that he did what he did. That he went to the areas that he went to, without fear, or at least without showing said fear. So often, so we saw, it does appear to be, and it was one of these lunatic students that had been indoctrinated into these systems that subsequently was successful in taking Charlie's life. The slogans on the bullets, hard leftist, pro-trans propaganda, of these students that his own father had to turn him in. 22 years old. His own father had to turn him in. So much these ideologies, they separate families, they separate sons from fathers, they separate daughters from mothers, and so on. There's a certain scripture about that. But the inroads that TPUSA was making into academia was unlike any other. And that is why, ultimately, not just for his views, not just for his faith, those were parts of it. Those were parts of it because that's what made Charlie understand that this was where he needed to go. And this was the risk he needed to take. Imagine it, ladies and gentlemen, we've gotten to a point where in a supposedly free country like America, and supposedly in our countries as well, where if you're going to have a speaker with an alternative view, they need to wear a bulletproof vest or bullet-resistant vest in order to simply speak because of the threat of violence. The fact that more people are not rallying against this, it's understandable given fear and stuff like that, but the amount of people that think that this is in any way okay is frankly very startling. I'll pull up some graphs for you, ladies and gentlemen. I posted this on my X, for example, on my X page. Because you need to understand what we are dealing with. You need to understand what we are dealing with. One of the things I'm working on as well at the moment, one of the key things we talk about is understanding the mind of your enemy. Make no mistake, whether you think that you have enemies or don't, you do, because other people across this world and within our communities have made you their enemy. These people that were celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk, they're within your communities, they're within your streets, they're on the bus sitting next to you. They're driving the car on the same roads that you are. They're in your healthcare institutions, they're in your educational institutions, they're your teachers grooming the next generation. They're within your fire service, they're within your police service, they're within your military, they're within the Secret Service, they're within cabinet, they're within politics. You have instances of comments celebrating Charlie Kirk's death coming out from the Department of War and the Secret Service themselves. They're within your media organisations, they're within the BBC, ITV, all of these other ones. They're everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. They believe that if you are their political rival, a lot of them believe that you should be killed. Think about it. You have a moral obligation. If these people are exactly who they say they are, if they're Nazis, if they're fascists, if they're these absolutely horrible people that are going to round people up and ethnically cleanse them and all of these things based on race, based on ethnicity, religion, sexuality, then you have a moral obligation to do something about that. You have a moral obligation to do something about these people, which usually is going to mean ending their life. However, that should then confuse you, because then you have people on that same side of the aisle coming out and saying that they condemn the murder or they condemn political violence. So then that means that they're sympathetic to Nazis? They're sympathetic to fascists? I should tell you a lot about the mindset of these people, that for all the people that they call fascists and Nazis, they are the fascists and Nazis themselves. They're the exact thing which they claim to be against. All right? Just from the opposite end of the scale, the opposite end of the political spectrum. Why would you say that you condemn violence against a Nazi if they're truly a Nazi? Makes no sense. That's how a lot of these people think there, ladies and gentlemen. They think that if you're Elon Musk or Trump, for example, especially if you're to the left of centre, half or more, near enough, just slightly below in the case of Elon Musk, because I'll bring the graphs up on screen for you now, think that it's okay, partially justified or more, for you to be murdered. Something that Charlie posted on his X not too long, a couple of days before he was fatally shot. Justification for murder of Elon Musk and Donald Trump, ladies and gentlemen. 48.6% left of centre think that it would be perfectly justified to kill Elon Musk. 55.2% left of centre think it would be okay to kill Trump. And 57%, or is it 57.6%, think it'd be okay to destroy Tesla dealerships. Remember that though, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's okay to destroy Tesla dealerships the next time they lecture you about climate change and stuff like that. This is who you're dealing with. This is who you're dealing with. That's why they celebrate. That's why they celebrate the death of a father whose young girl, another young child, and his wife were in the audience, seeing this happen right in front of them. And that the young girl, his daughter, being scared of the sound of the shot, not knowing what was going on, instinctively, as any young child would do, trying to run into their father's arms for protection, for safety. And when she was stopped, obviously she wasn't allowed to run to her dad. She just said, "Why can't I go see Daddy?" That was what she was alleged to have said. Little did she know that would be one of the last times, if not the last time, that she would ever see him. These people don't think like you and me, ladies and gentlemen. They don't think that these people are people. Say we want about nationalists and that they say that, you know, we're being genocided by replacement and stuff like that, which they're absolutely correct about. They don't want necessarily anything bad to happen to just a regular person. They would say it doesn't belong here. Because it's our home. It's not everybody's home. It's our home. And we never asked for it to be open to the world. We want those people to be perfectly safe and happy in their own home, and they can do whatever the hell they want with it. They want self-determination for those people as well. But we want self-determination for ourselves in return as a people. Many instances, a lot of those people have been turned to hatred, and it often comes across that way, but it's just because they have such a burning love for their people, and they hate the way that they've seen their countries overrun and besieged. This foreign virus, if you will. This foreign infection, which is exactly what it is. And I say that with no hatred towards any one person or group in particular. It's just the case that it has made our communities worse and low trust in every single way. It's eroded our culture. It's taken away a lot of our people, quite literally. Heinous crimes have been committed against children. In order to keep this under wraps, we've had to go into this politically correct socialist tyranny of a society. It shows you everything points to the fact that this society is not okay, ladies and gentlemen. The fact that people haven't been listened to, even going back as far as the 40s, is in large part for that. Because we never wanted this. It was forced on us. And now in order to keep the status quo as it is, you now need to start killing people with any form of different opinion or trying to speak the truth. It's time for us to not back down, though, ladies and gentlemen. If that's what the sentence is, then that's what the sentence is. Charlie Kirk, as powerful he was in life, will be unspeakably more powerful that he has been removed from this life, from this world that didn't deserve him. This world did not deserve him. In slaying one Charlie Kirk, you could say that you have created millions more, which, yes, is true. But you haven't just created millions more Charlie Kirks, ladies and gentlemen. You created millions of more people to the right of Charlie Kirk, because they're now seeing, well, I'm going to get lumped in with all of these other people anyway, with the labels and with the terms that people use. So what's to stop me from going that far? What's to stop me from going even further into these quote-unquote extremes? I'm going to get labelled all of the same, and I've been labelled as the same. Ladies and gentlemen, I've had people use these terms to describe me. It's a risk that we have to be willing to take, because our very existence depends on it. You want to know how ghoulish and how demonic and how evil these people are, ladies and gentlemen? I'm going to pull up on screen for you in a moment a comment that was left on Erica Kirk, who please say a prayer for, if you would, ladies and gentlemen, on her Instagram page. I believe this was in the aftermath of her husband's killing. But people, if you think that the people gloating about it on social media have just been bad, can you imagine the things that have been sent directly to Erica? You imagine things that have been sent directly to her to rip the wounds open as far as possible. But he's utterly demonically possessed individuals whom I'm finding it very difficult to pray for. I'm finding it very difficult to do the things that we should do. But this is what was sent. This is what was left as a comment. It says here, from an account known as Malaikab, now your children have no father. And there's a bunch of crying, laughing emojis. This is how they were willing to react, ladies and gentlemen, to the moderate candidate, the moderate conservative that extended them a microphone, that did not point a gun at them and say, if you don't do what I tell you to do, you're going in a mass grave, or you're going in a labor camp or concentration camp or a gas chamber, a gulag. He gave them a microphone and said, please tell me your ideas. Let's talk about it. What message does that send to everybody else? Now sees, oh, I guess the time in many instances for words has passed. I'm not condoning anything. I don't want anybody to go and do anything, obviously. We need to hope in many instances that cooler heads will prevail. Because you got to take into account there's other people that are watching America at the moment, other interests, other foreign interests that are watching America and are itching for America to destroy itself, that are itching for Britain to destroy itself and all of our countries to destroy themselves. And that's exactly what a civil war is going to do. If we destroy ourselves in any kind of civil war or civil conflict, it only makes it easier for the next person coming in that wanted to take us over as well to make their demands or to make their conquest all the easier. That's why we have to hope that we can resolve these by peaceful means that are going to ensure the survival of our people, the survival of our country, survival of our faith, whilst also not tearing ourselves apart at the seams. Make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, these people explicitly say that they are here to take over. I want you to go back to this from, I believe it was Glastonbury, a little while ago, where Zara Sultana, MP for Coventry South, said, we are not here to beg for crumbs off the table, we are taking the fucking lot. This is a foreigner within our lands that's saying, we are here to take over. And she was on stage with the Bob Vylan person that was chanting death, death to the IDF and saying, you want your country back, fuck off, or shut the fuck up. Outright saying, we are here to take you over. We are here to impose what we want on you and to take away your ability and your say to do anything else. If we destroy ourselves in dealing with this, ladies and gentlemen, it's only going to make us all the weaker to deal with outside threats that still have eyes on us as a country for resources and people, etc. Here's that example.
Can you put your hands together and make some noise for Zara Sultana?
Student debt, rising bills, crippling public services, genocide in Gaza. And right now, fascism growling at the door. And we say, fuck no, we are going to fight back. For the first time in a long time, we are saying, we're not here to beg for crumbs off the table. We're taking the fucking lot.
So this is communism, ladies and gentlemen. This is not only just communism, this is a foreign communist coming here to tell us how things are going to be. These are the people that through our empathy, through our weaponized empathy, we've allowed in and have had forced on us. The young generation in this instance have been groomed into thinking that this is a good thing. They've been groomed into thinking that the takeover of their country by foreign powers and foreign people is a good thing. It's a virtuous thing to do. By genociding themselves out, by eliminating 800 to 900 of their own next generation, 800, 900 million, by the way, of their own next generation. All the while saying we need immigrants to come in then and feed the shortfall that we can't feed because we killed a bunch of babies. Again, 800 to 900 million that should be here that aren't. This is why it's more than just a political battle, it's a spiritual battle. But then the person that would have had a conversation with Zara, that would have had a clash of ideas, they decided to kill. So can you imagine what they're going to do with the rest of us? That's why, ladies and gentlemen, the time has long since passed for you to sit on the fence. Even if you sit on that fence, to mention the devil owns the fence. But also you're going to get treated the same anyway. As I said, if you're not part of the club, you're basically marked for death. So you might as well be on the right side. You might as well be on the side of good. And in many instances, it's going to be on the same side as your own people, if you're of the people of this nation and our nations of Great Britain. You want some examples of how they see you, ladies and gentlemen, of how the left sees people who just put across a very strong case and strong example for their faith, for their religion. Look no further than the streamer Destiny, for example. He said that Charlie Kirk, I hate him, I think he's a Satan spawn. Here's that video for you.
I hate Charlie Kirk. I think he's actually a Satan spawn, but he's very, very strategically minded. I hate Charlie Kirk.
That was Destiny on CNN. It's only a short clip. You can find it down below. But this is how they see you. This is how they see you when Charlie Kirk got shot. According to another video I have here, the first instinct for Destiny was to laugh. So they see when Sam Height says, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget when we win, these people wanted you dead and broke, your children raped and brainwashed, and they find it funny. That is exactly who we are dealing with. That is exactly who we are dealing with. It's not just political commentators on CNN either. Guardian put up a hit piece on Charlie Kirk. Notice they'll call it a shooting. They won't call it a murder. They'll call it a shooting. They say, in his own words, prowling blacks and the great replacement strategy, the far-right commentator didn't pull his punches when discussing his bigoted views on current events. This was about one day. This is about one day after he was killed. One of the ones it says here is on debate. We record all of it so that we can put it on the internet so people can see these ideas collide. When people stop talking, that's when you get violence. That's when civil war happens, because you start to think the other side is so evil and they lose their humanity. Does that sound like something a Hitler or Mussolini would say? You know, these far-right individuals. Does that sound like something that would come from the mouth of a far-right dictator? Ladies and gentlemen, this is how stupid they think you are as well. They think you're stupid enough to fall for this, because most people are not going to read through it to find this. Or because he would say things like, reject feminism, for example, on the subject of Taylor Swift. He would say, submit to your husband, Taylor, you're not in charge. Or because he would express that the patriarchal order is the divine order appointed by our superior, our almighty superior. And that he would just affirm basic things that pretty much everybody believed until a few years or decades ago. That his views are out there. People forget that the views that most people have nowadays are the fad. The views that most people have nowadays are the new thing. It's not the way that it's always been. And we are not so enlightened as we think. I can promise you that. We are not so enlightened as you think. It's funny how the minute how we started walking away from God in big ways, that Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26 and certain passages of Revelation all started to seem to be a bit more important from then on. Or because he would say that we need to have a Nuremberg-style trial for every gender-affirming clinic doctor. We need it immediately, referring to people that had not just adults, but were forcibly mutilating and destroying the bodies permanently of confused and very, not just confused, but often autistic and mentally disabled children. But what do we need to do, ladies and gentlemen, from here on out? What do we need to do to deal with these communists and these disgusting people? Think of the legacy that Charlie Kirk is going to leave now. If I had to think about it, a lot of other prominent political commentators on the right have said this. Many of them said if they met their end the way that Charlie Kirk did, they would be, in a way, kind of proud because of how much space rent-free. Can you imagine how much rent-free space Charlie Kirk occupied in these kids' heads and the heads of the establishment and shadowy organizations, potentially, that wanted him gone because he was too problematic? All because he was willing to go to where it wasn't popular and speak the truth. In true fashion of the apostles of 2,000 years ago, you go to places where they did not want to know this stuff. They would like, leave us alone. And you would go anyway. Because if you're sent here to heal, ladies and gentlemen, it's not the healthy that need a doctor. It's the sick that need a doctor. Sadly, many people don't know how sick they are. People don't know how sick and twisted their natural thought processes and ways have become. Speak the truth, regardless of the cost, and you can take back Britain. That's what Charlie Kirk, the essence of his message was, ladies and gentlemen. Having courage in spades, ladies and gentlemen. That's what he had to say.
Ooh, I don't want to be called a racist by the London Times. Who cares? That's so 2008 around America. Speak the truth, regardless the cost. You could take back Britain. Ooh, I don't...
Speak the truth, regardless of the cost. You can take back Britain. Does that not just say it all, ladies and gentlemen? Our enemies Our enemies want us to be scared. They want us to stop speaking the truth. They want us to shrink away and hide because of the fear of what they've put into people now. Because that would mean that they have won. They have to win this through fear. Another thing I talked about in another project I've got is fear and how powerful of a motivator it is. You want to know who knows that? God knows that. That's why throughout the scriptures you see so often, do not be afraid. People will try to prey on certain fears to get you to do certain things. It's why the COVID scaremongering and all of the other scaremongering with regards to digital ID and migration, etc., is so powerful. It gets people to do what they want them to do, i.e. the establishment. Usually because there's money to be made or there's power to be gained. We cannot afford to be scared, ladies and gentlemen. Even if we are, believe you me, we have every reason to be. We need to be able to still do the right thing in spite of that fear. That's courage. And if you are feeling that fear at the moment to an extent where it almost paralyzes you, you can still do the right thing. And that makes you tremendously full of courage indeed. By definition, ladies and gentlemen, only the coward is capable of the greatest courage. No matter how small, no matter how, minuscule you think you are and you're up against this Goliath. Maybe we could learn a few things by following Charlie's example. And we owe it to him, we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our future generations, we owe it to our country, we owe it to the Lord. To fight against evil. To always fight against evil. It's the fight of our very lives. The most important fight that likely we will ever be in. I'm going to leave this here now, ladies and gentlemen. I ask that you please pray for Charlie's soul. Please pray for his family. You can imagine the heartbreak and the pain that they are going through. Not just having lost, but in the evil, truly evil forces. I want to pray on them, to weaken them, to rip those wounds open as far as they can so that they'll never heal. Please also pray for the souls and for the minds of the youth of today that see this and they rejoice. They see this and they think that it's a good thing that just because somebody had a different political opinion, that means that their life should be forfeit. Pray that instead of turning out like the youth in the summer of 2020 with the George Floyd situation, which you can see on screen now, ladies and gentlemen, this is how you know that we are not the same. This was what happened after George Floyd died of a drug overdose in police custody after resisting arrest. Career criminal, disgusting individual, whom the left turned into a saint. Woe to those who call good evil and evil good, and the left took one of the most evil people we've ever seen in recent history and turned him into a saint. And they still, to this day, venerate and worship him, if you will. The Senate, for example, held a minute's silence for George Floyd when he died of a drug overdose in Minnesota, whilst universities were burning down, whilst people's businesses were being burnt down, Minnesota burned to a crisp, cheered on by the politicians, police precincts and all manner of things burnt down. All because a career criminal, a felon, a disgusting individual died of a drug overdose. Think of how many times you were lied to. Think of how many times your fears were preyed on. all the lies you fell for, if you're like me. And when Charlie Kirk, prominent conservative Christian influencer, was murdered in cold blood in front of his family, there was no burning down of cities. There was no tearing down of universities. There was no rioting. There was no flames going long into the night and chants of tear everything down. This was how they reacted. Gathered in prayer, in solidarity, in unity, aspiring towards the greater good. It's good versus evil, ladies and gentlemen, and you're in the fight, whether you like it or not, whether you want to be or not. You simply have to choose your side. You simply have to choose your side. The fence is not going to be a good place for you, even if you're unsure of where to go. So, ladies and gentlemen, exercise caution. I haven't done the best job of doing this on X. Exercise caution in the coming days, especially, of how many people will politicize this. You've already seen how many Democrat operatives have tried to politicize this to push gun control and everything like that. Despite the fact that they're not honoring Charlie's memory by doing that, because it's not what he would have wanted, but also, you know, it's to push a very sinister agenda. It's part of getting the Americans to surrender their Second Amendment, which is their one thing protecting their First and all of their other amendments from being overwritten by these disgusting people. It wasn't the gun that killed Charlie Kirk. It wasn't the repurposed Mauser and the 3006 that killed him. It was the lunatic wielding it. Just like it wasn't necessarily the knife that killed Irina Zarutska. It was the lunatic 14-time felon wielding it that killed her. We've learned this lesson in the UK now, where we understand exactly what happens when a populace becomes disarmed and weak and feminized. If any of you are listening to this in America, please protect that Second Amendment with your life. Not only for your own sake, but it's also what Charlie would have wanted. He understood that this meant that it could result in his death. I suppose you could say that it did. Even he would see, I would imagine, that as a worthy sacrifice for the freedom of his people. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to leave you with a video from Turning Point USA themselves. As I said, please pray for Charlie and his family, obviously. Just pray for his young children that they're going to have a lot of holes where happy memories where the dad should be. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. They're going to have a lot of holes where memories of their father should be. They're going to have a lot of times where, again, they should be hearing his voice, clapping for them and cheering for them at recitals, at athletic pursuits, games. They'll never be able to experience that now. And that our enemies found it funny. They found this funny. Godspeed, ladies and gentlemen. See you next time.
We're active in about 15 campuses, and we're growing very, very quickly. And keep in mind, this is not just a flash in the pan movement. We're going to become an institution to give them the power and the confidence to stand up and let their voice be heard.
I started this organization when I was 18 years old.
I decided not to go to college. I didn't get in my dream school, which was the United States Military Academy at West Point. I have this idea to galvanize and motivate the future youth of this country around a core set of ideas, not just political parties or politicians. And the ideas are really America's the greatest country in the history of the world. The Constitution is the greatest political document ever written, and free enterprise is the most assured way to lift people out of poverty and create prosperity for all. Those are the three big ideas. And I think that's something that can win.
We as Christians are called to go into the public arena to correct error with truth. So I go to college campuses and there's a lot of error. We're all sinners. We all live in error. I'm far more interested in what God wants of me than what I want from God.
I have to say this without getting emotional, but I'm very proud of my husband. And I know many of you are too. You have worked so hard. And I know a lot of you have seen, obviously, his videos on TikTok and all the stuff he does on campus, but no one gets to see him from my angle except for myself and our children. And the sacrifices that he made this year, he's amazing. I'm very blessed.
And I would not have been able to do any of it without Erica. And that's the real truth. I'll tell you what.
You are here as a grassroots response to the top-down revolution happening in this country. I want our Turning Point USA students to receive a round of applause. These are the freedom fighters of America.
The media said that Turning Point could never run a ground game. They weren't experienced. They didn't know Charlie, right?
This is the greatest generational realignment since Woodstock. This generation is the most conservative generation that we have seen in well over 50 years, and the numbers show it. What young people especially are screaming at is they say, give me a structure that I can live my life by. And especially with young men, more challenging of them, more saying, you know what, honestly, I'm not gonna talk down to you. Stop being a boy and become a man. You wanna learn what that means? Come to church and I'll tell you what it means to become a man. Because we have the greatest story ever told. What can I do to save the country? You answer that question every single day because you are doing the work to save this beautiful republic. You are doing something that is bigger than you.
If everything completely goes away, how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered for courage for my faith. That would be the most important thing. Most important thing is my faith in my life.